My name is John, and I'm the founder of My First Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin education nonprofit that was founded in El Salvador in 2021. Since we began, I just want to go over some proof of work, and then I want to tell you about the why we're doing this, why it's important. So since we began in 2021 in El Salvador, we have taught over 35,000 students in person in El Salvador. The video that's playing behind me is just some of our proof of work. So it's graduations, it's classes, it's events that we hold in El Salvador, and that's just going to be playing behind me. And then there's a map at the end, and I'm going to get to what the map is. That's really exciting. I love maps. I hope you guys love maps too. Everything that we do is open source. So that has led to some really interesting things, some really great things. One of them is the government of El Salvador has taken our flagship product, which is this. This is a 10-week program. It's the Bitcoin Diploma. So it takes you from zero to Bitcoin, basically. The first 5 weeks are financial literacy. Doesn't talk about Bitcoin at all. What is money? Why is money? What's the problem that we have? And then the second half of it, so the remaining 5 weeks, talks about Bitcoin. And this is, we've created a number of different materials. We have a number of different classes, but this is the one that we're most known for. And excitingly, because it's open source, meaning that anybody could use it, that has led to some cool stuff. So the government of El Salvador, the Ministry of Education, has actually adopted this book, and they're teaching it to students across the country. In fact, we are helping them to do this. And this year, 2024, we trained 500 public school teachers spread across the country, which are each teaching it in their own school now. Next year, that program will expand. We're actually creating more curriculum for the government for younger audiences, which will also be open source. So this is the first time in the world, right? So we started to teach the Bitcoin Diploma in El Salvador. It was the first time in the world that it was used, that there was a Bitcoin Diploma in a public school anywhere in the world, and now the government itself is doing it, which is really, really exciting. And actually, just yesterday, we released a new course. So a one-session version of this. So essentially, the Bitcoin Diploma condensed into one course. We released that yesterday. It's open source. We released it in English and Spanish. The Bitcoin Diploma has been translated into, I think, about 20 languages at this point. And I'm sure the intro class will be translated significantly as well. And I want to circle back to some really exciting stuff about what's possible when you open source something and what that means for here in Africa, what that means for here in Kenya, what's already happened. But before that, I want to talk about why. Why does Mi Primer Bitcoin exist? Mi Primer Bitcoin exists, and independent Bitcoin education is so important because we're on the wrong path, because the world is broken, because the incentives are broken. We live in a world where others think for us. We are not in control of our own lives. We're not in control of our own future. We're not in control of our own money. And that gets worse every year, and the effects of that, the second and third order effects of that, get worse every year. If we are not in control of our money, if we are not in control of our present and our future, we don't have motivation to build, to create. Introductory Bitcoin education is a gateway drug to a better world. Once you learn that you can control your money and you could control your present, you realize that you could control your power, your future, your life, and that changes everything. It changes how you interact with each other. It changes how you view your neighbor. And it incentivizes you to look further into the future. And if you're in control of your future, then you could build something, you could create, you could start a family, you could start a business. So this isn't about Bitcoin. This is about power. And how we all have it and we need to take it back. We have power in our own lives for our own future. But it's tough. It's tough. If the objective is to encourage and help students to think for themselves, then that means we have to take a different path. If we want a different future, we need to do things different in the present. So we can't follow the templates of the fiat world if we want to build something different in the future. And something that's really poignant about that is money, right? Money itself. We work with the government. We're helping them to set up a Bitcoin education department, again, first in the world, so we could step back and work with them less. But we don't take any money from them. We never have taken money from government. We never will. We are very, very selective where our funding comes from. We almost entirely reject all corporate funding, and our funding comes from grassroots and from grants. Grants like HRF and OpenSats. But actually, most of it comes from you. And that's important. That's important because on a long enough timeline, Bitcoin education will be captured by whoever funds it. Think about that. What are the incentives of corporations or governments that want to fund Bitcoin education? Is it for you to be empowered? Or is it for you to buy a product? Is it for you to follow a certain party or politician or policy? The only people who are incentivized to create a future generation that is empowered to think for themselves and define their own destiny is us. So let me give you an example of how some of this happens, right? Or one particular example of how the community has supported us, because I think it's just really cool. So there's a couple in El Salvador. One of them is a Bitcoiner, and his wife likes to knit. So she started knitting these orange pills, literal orange pills. And they started to sell them at meetups and other Bitcoin events in El Salvador. And they use our donate QR code, right? It's only Bitcoin. So they put their proof of work in, and they knit these, and literally 100%, like none of it, they're not getting the cost of the materials or anything back. It all goes to the organization. And that sounds small. It's probably bigger than you think. They've sold maybe 1,000 so far, and it's actually been a pretty significant boost for us. But it's that idea, that concept that we could all contribute. We're all in charge of our own future, right? It's not just about the students, it's about us. We need to be empowered too. We need to know that we could define the future, that we could play a role, that we could shape it. So I want to talk about international, outside of El Salvador. Because it's open source, there was educators around the world that realized that this could be useful for them as well in their own communities. And about 1.5 years ago, we created what we call the Independent Educators Node Network. And these are educators around the world who share best practices and lift each other up, right? there's six consensus rules that they have to agree to, and that is that the education must be independent, impartial, community-led, quality, Bitcoin only, and teach empowerment. If they agree to those six, then they could apply to the network. And actually at this point, because it's so important that we follow the ethos of Bitcoin, if we want a Bitcoin future, we need to live that way now. So this is now decentralized. We no longer control it. The network is self-governing. So the network itself will decide if new nodes are admitted based on if they agree to those six consensus rules and if they could demonstrate some proof of work. Thus far, we have nodes in more than 30 nations around the world. And the fastest growing region is Africa. We're adding about three or four African nations each month now for the last few months. And it's beautiful, right? Because people are taking charge of their future. People are taking charge of their own lives. And that's happening here in Kenya, too. So I don't know if Felix is here. Yeah, Felix is there in the back. It's here. I see a lot of people know him. If you don't, then you should, right? Let me tell you a little bit about Felix. So Felix is a node in the network. He's actually a full node, which means that it's a higher level, higher responsibility, and he's part of the governance level. He lives here in Nairobi. He has never left Kenya, but he teaches the Bitcoin diploma and other Bitcoin education online. So he has students outside of Kenya sometimes. He has inspired Bitcoin education projects in Nigeria, in Afghanistan, in South Africa, and in Haiti. In the past year, right? That's in 2024. He had a graduation, a Bitcoin diploma graduation this past Saturday here in Nairobi. I think many of you were able to attend. And it was so beautiful. It was so amazing. I've actually never been to a Bitcoin diploma graduation outside of El Salvador. So for me to see this happening somewhere else, and again, like, it's not the same everywhere, right? There was a local flavor to it. They actually had like a dance competition in the intermission, which is not something that I've ever seen in El Salvador. It was amazing. So we could all be more like Felix, right? He saw a need for something in the community here in Kenya, and he took it upon himself. He took it upon himself to teach others, to help others, to guide others. So Felix, if you could stand up one more time. If you are here in Kenya and you want to connect about Bitcoin education, this is the guy, right?
Hi, John. John, sorry. It's me here.
Oh,
okay. Time, kindly. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. So this is the map of all the different nodes. So each orange dot represents a country. There could be multiple nodes in each country. But I want to end this with, this is the front line of the next war. The front line of the next war is inside of our minds. It's what we think. It's whether we're in control. Because if we are not defining our future, someone else is, right? This is the front line of the next war. This is the only line of the next war. If we want a better future, we need to do things differently in the present. And that is harder. But I would rather fail at trying to change the world than acquiesce to this one. I'm so optimistic about the future because of the people in this room, because so many people are taking that initiative and taking charge. We create revolution by living it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.